What's going on, everybody? And I hope you're enjoying your early Thursday afternoon. This is NYG Jeffy T85 here. And I'm just going to give you a spring training preview and roster preview for the New York Mets as we get ready for Major League Baseball spring training, which is actually only 2 weeks away. 2 short weeks away until spring training has arrived and all the New York Mets head down to PortStLucie and get ready for the start of the Major League Baseball season that will be happening at the end of March, as the 2023 Major League Baseball season is not that far away from kicking off. Just to preview the New York Mets in terms of their roster and how I think things will shake out going into this season. Obviously, the New York Mets, the one big change that they have done to their roster out of the most of everything is their starting rotation. Right now, their starting rotation is a lot different than what it was back in 2022. Jacob deGrom is gone. He's in Texas. Taijuan Walker is gone. He's in Philadelphia. All these guys that were here last year, they're gone. The only pitcher that is back with the team is Carlos Carrasco and Max Scherzer. That's it. Everybody else that was with the team last year and that starting rotation consistently is gone. You could say David Peterson, and you could also say Tyler McGill. But those two guys are more of bullpen / long relievers. They can be thrown in the starting rotation, but they're more of those long reliever types too. And you're going to get a full season of Joey Lucchesi, who pretty much missed all of last year due to Tommy John surgery. The New York Mets are going to get ready for a big-time new year of new starting pitchers on this team. You obviously have the starting rotation right now is going to be shaping out. You have Kodai Senga, who they signed when he came over from Japan. You have Jose Quintana, who pitched pretty well for the St. Louis Cardinals. And then obviously the big acquisition, Justin Verlander, the future Hall of Famer, who signed with the team after winning the World Series last year with the Houston Astros. Those are your big acquisitions right now in the starting rotation for the New York Mets. As well as you have other guys like Carlos Carrasco, who was rumored to be traded in the offseason, but looks like the New York Mets are going to keep him around on the roster for this time being. As well as you got Tyler McGill. You also got David Peterson that could serve as at the end of the starting rotation. But right now, it looks like the New York Mets are going to be going into the season. They're going to have Verlander and Scherzer as their 1-2. Really relying on a couple of pitchers in their late 30s, early 40s. Hoping that these guys can stay healthy and be able to go out there and pitch effectively. And then you have a decent middle of the rotation with the guys. One guy in Senga who's never pitched in the major leagues but has a lot of high upside. Quintana, who's sturdy from the left-handed side of the rotation. Has had some injury problems, but he's not bad as a middle of the rotation guy. You obviously got Carrasco, another guy who's towards the back end of the rotation. You also have some younger guys that could potentially be included in the rotation as well if they end up having a very good spring training. One very intriguing name is Zach Green, who the New York Mets picked up in the Rule 5 draft from the New York Yankees. The guy has talent. He's only 26. He's another guy that could be a potential intriguing possible player you could add in there with the starting rotation. But right now, it looks like it's going to be Verlander, Scherzer, Sengai, and Quintana as the top 4, barring injury. And then you have other guys like Carrasco, McGill, Peterson, Green, some younger players like Jose Butto coming from the minor leagues, Steven Ridings from the minor leagues as well, another young pitcher. More of a relief pitcher, but he can start. Zach Green. That all could be in contention for that starting rotation. In terms of the relief pitchers, you obviously acquired, you got back and re-signed Adam Ottavino. You still have Edwin Diaz, who you signed to a big-time deal. You traded for a couple of relievers. One from the Florida Marlins in Alicia Hernandez. You also traded for another high reliever, Brooks Raley, from the Tampa Bay Rays. They're all going to come into your bullpen. You also signed veteran reliever David Robertson. And you have a couple of other guys in there that could potentially be solid relievers coming back with the team, like a Drew Smith, a Jeff Brigham, you also traded for from the Marlins, a Sean Nogasic, and a relief pitcher from the minor leagues who got a little bit of a chance with the New York Mets last year. And that's Bryce Montes de Oca. Those are a couple of the players that could be potentially involved in the New York Mets starting relief pitching rotation going forward. Now you get to the catching position. Obviously, the New York Mets have 3 pitchers right now in the catching position that could be potential starters. Francisco Alvarez, the top prospect in the minor leagues, and you have veterans catchers in Omar Narvaez, who they signed from the Milwaukee Brewers, and Tomas Nido, who they re-signed to a 2-year deal. These are a couple of guys that could be factoring in the catching position. It sounds like that Alvarez still needs to work on his defense, so he could be ticketed for AAA going to start the season. And it sounds like Narvaez and Nido are going to be starting off at the catching position to begin this season. That's going to be very intriguing to watch going into this baseball season. But I do believe that Francisco Alvarez he's the future of that position. There's even been rumors of him potentially being the designated hitter, but we'll have to wait and see what's going to happen going into the beginning of the regular season. But I believe it'll start out with Narvaez and Nido splitting time at catcher. Defensively, you're not going to get a whole lot from the bat side until Alvarez is ready, and then they'll have him take the spot over completely. In terms of the infield, obviously we know who's starting at first base, second base, and shortstop. Those are clear as day. Pete Alonso is your starting first baseman, one of the best first basemen in Major League Baseball. It could potentially get an extension in the very near future from the New York Mets. Jeff McNeil just recently got a 4-year extension from the New York Mets. He'll be their starting second baseman. Still coming off being the league leader in terms of batting. He's the league leading batting champion. And you have Francisco Lindor, who's coming off a very good season last year for the Mets. The biggest question right now is who plays at third base. Obviously, it could have been Carlos Correa, who was looking like he was going to become a New York Met. But now it's wide open. And it's right now probably going to come down to 3 players, in my opinion. And that's third baseman Eduardo Escobar, utility guy, who could be the front runner for that spot. Top prospect Brett Baty. And veteran utility infielder Luis Guillorme. Brett Baty has apparently been training under the tutelage of former multi-all-star Troy Tulowitzki. That's a good sign for Baty when Tulowitzki was a top player in Major League Baseball for a long time. I think he's the one that should have the inside track to that starting third base job, but I would not be surprised again if the New York Mets ended up going with somebody like Eduardo Escobar to start the season. Start with the veteran, let the young player continue to develop his craft until he's ready to go into the season. You also have other options as backup players. You have 2 other young prospects that could potentially get a chance in Mark Vientos and Ronnie Mauricio, who was just the Dominican League MVP last month. he's another player that could potentially be factoring in at third base because he's been taking some grounders at third because of the fact that Lindor is signed up at shortstop for the long period. And then you have some veteran guys like a Danny Mendick, who's pretty much going to be a veteran infielder on the team going forward, but could potentially be a guy that could sneak into one of those starting spots. But really, first, second, shortstop are locked in. Alonso at first, McNeil at second, Lindor at short. It's really that third base position that's still wide open. I believe Beatty is the front runner, but we have to wait and see. Now in terms of the outfield. To me, the outfield, we already know who's starting. The New York Mets just brought back Brandon Nimmo on a long-term deal, so he's going to be starting in center field. Then you have Mark Canha, who will be most likely starting in left field, and you have Starling Marte, depending on how he's recovering from his core muscle surgery, still in different timeline when exactly he'll be ready for spring training or for the beginning of the season. He'll be your starting right fielder. They just signed veteran outfielder Tommy Pham to a deal, so if God forbid Marte is not ready, Pham can be able to start out at right field until Marte is ready to go. You got veteran outfielder / designated hitter Darren Ruff. You also have Khalil Lee. Unfortunately, he's in a little bit of legal trouble right now, so hopefully nothing bad is going to come out of it, but he is going to be another player that the New York Mets could count on in terms of the outfield. But right now, the starting outfield, when healthy, from left to right, Canha, Nimmo, Marte. Very good outfield when they're healthy. All very productive. It's just health is the biggest question with all three of these guys. Mainly Starling Marte, because he is getting up there in age. But the Mets now with Tommy Pham in there, a veteran outfielder, is going to help that team out. Because Pham is a very good number 4 outfielder, but he could also step in and be a starter. So we'll have to wait and see what's going to happen with the New York Mets in terms of their outfield construction going forward. And if they still might make another move or so for another outfielder. And then you get to the designated hitter position, which right now, last year, was an absolute black hole for this team. They went through designated hitters like crazy, whether it was Dominic Smith, who's no longer on the team, whether it was J.D. Davis, who was traded at the trade deadline, and then they brought in Daniel Vogelbach, Tyler Naquin, Darren Ruff, and none of them really got the job done. Now, you could say if Francisco Alvarez is not ready to be the starting catcher, you could throw him in at the designated hitter position. You're going to have Pete Alonso play a little bit of catchers or DH as well. They want to give him a breather. You have mainly, though, Vogelbach, and you have Ruff that look like they're going to be the main designated hitter guys for this team going into the 2023 season. Is that enough? Vogelbach actually did pretty good against left-handed pitching. Right-handed pitching is where he struggled. And Ruff just had a miserable season altogether. But do you trust these guys to be able to lock down that designated hitter position, or do the New York Mets still potentially need to make an upgrade? You can also count on Ronnie Mauricio. You can count on Ronnie Mauricio if he's not going to be in the infield. You can put him at DH. Mark Vientos is another one. That's where you could use some of these younger players. Put him at designated hitter. Give the New York Mets another option. So I think that position, which GM Billy Epler said it was called undefined. There's a lot of options you could put to designated hitter. That's still the one position to me that is very questionable going to the season. But we'll have to wait and see what's going to happen. Either way, the New York Mets have improved their roster. They've lost a couple of good players, including Jacob deGrom and Chris Bassett, who I forgot to mention earlier. Bassett's now with the Blue Jays. It's another starting pitcher that departed. Taijuan Walker, who's with the Phillies. But they made some good acquisitions for the beginning of this season. And this team is ready to go on a run this year for the Major League Baseball in the National League East. And potentially find a way to not only go far, but finally close out that division and win the NLEast this year. So let me know in the comments section what you think about the New York Mets. And what is your weakness and strength if you believe in this New York Mets team. Hit the like button, sub up if you haven't already, turn on the notifications for videos and shorts dropping on the channel. Thank you very much, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Take it easy, and as always, let's go New York Mets. All you got to do is you got to believe in those boys from Queens.